wrong.
I think we got it all.
I'm trying to tell Paul he should have brought books, because would we have bought them, ladies?
Yes.
Yes, we would have bought them. Okay, but it's all right, because we're going to go on Amazon and get them cheap.
But no autograph.
And then Paul will send us little imprints to sign them for our books. Yeah,
And the e-books, all the last 3 e-books are now up there. The first one.
Okay, but we want the John Hancock. So instead, you know what? In the break, you'll take pictures. But we're never going to get to the break. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Sit down, ladies. Everybody's standing up. Get your food. Sit down. Behave yourself. Now. Okay. All right. It's me. Okay.
Yes.
All right. For those of you here for the first time, everyone else shut your ears. But this is, all right, I'm going to say this really quickly. My fictionalized memoir, Don't Jump, chronicles a woman's quest to find her place and purpose amidst sex, drugs, rock and roll, and celebrity. Now this installment finds Andy hearkening back to her first love in an attempt to understand all the subsequent failures since. Now don't judge me. It was 1969. Don't judge me. I have a 12-year-old daughter. If she heard 1 second of this, I would freak the fuck out. So don't judge me. I grew up to be a very respectable young lady. All right. You don't need to know anything to hear this. Huh?
Happened to the best of us.
Yeah. I mean, you got whoever was around in 1969. You know, right? Okay. It was different times then. Okay. So don't, I'm going to know if you're judging me. I'm going to see it, because I look at you when I read it. I can see all the judgment in your eyes. But I can also see the love.
Good.
Availability was plainly not attractive to me. It was the unattainable that always stole my heart and made mincemeat of my brain. Thinking back, I could trace this dysfunction all the way back to my first true love. Not quite 12 when I met Alan. He was 16, in high school, and very cool. Tall, lean, and blue-eyed, he had wavy brown hair that swooped down low on his forehead. With a menacing smile, he walked with sexy confidence. A real-life James Dean. Alan's parents owned the Catskill Mountains resort my father worked in the summers during the late 60s and early 70s. Most of the guests spent a week or two there, and the truly affluent spent the whole summer with their wives and children, from late June until Labor Day. The husbands came up on the weekends, and I suppose generally had their mistress in the city, while their wives were running after waiters, lifeguards, and the social staff. Dirty Dancing summed it up brilliantly. Alan was Patrick Swayze to my baby, only we never danced, and it took me 3 years to get him. The first summer, I couldn't do it. It was cutting off the circulation in my finger. The first summer, I snuck around trying to put myself in his path whenever possible. He was a waiter in the children's dining room. I'd coincidentally show up just in time to help him set up 3 times a day. I made this up. He'd laugh and pat me on the head like a puppy. I lived for the moments I spent with him. On Labor Day, the last day of the season, he said, "When you're 14, you're going to be my girlfriend." Little did he know I considered that a deal set in stone. I spent the next 2 years planning and living for that day. I saw him every day for the next 2 summers, suffering through a yearly 10-month separation, relieved only by a 1-week midwinter visit. His sister Sue was one of my closest friends, which enabled me to be around a lot. They had an apartment on the hotel grounds where Sue and I spent many an hour listening to Frank Zappa and watching old black and white detective movies with her grandma. Maybe it was one of your movies. You're old enough, right? Alan would always happen through at one point or another. I worshipped him, and he knew it. And he seemed to take delight in my adulation. Occasionally, I reminded him of his promise, which always made him laugh. Did he think I was kidding or something? A few months shy of my 15th birthday, I arrived for the season jumping out of my skin, bursting with anticipation of fulfilling my long-cherished dream. As if it had been hours instead of months, I headed straight for the children's dining room and picked up some silverware and began setting tables, without uttering a sound. It took a moment or two for Alan to notice. He looked up at me and with what appeared to be genuine delight. I flirted with new confidence. This was to be my summer after all. Was I crazy? Or was he flirting back? Had something truly changed? Wow, Andy, you've really grown up this year. I'm working as a mother's helper and bunking with the other girls, I proudly responded, as if to verify the fact. It was the first summer I wasn't staying with my dad. He was, however, still on the grounds and close at hand. Gratefully, I was a stealth teenager. Alan invited me up to the shacks that night, signaling my coming of age. The shacks were, as they sound, run-down wooden huts in the woods that were used as waiters' quarters. Alan shared his shack with Bill, his best friend. On that first evening, frightened and excited, I headed up there after work. It was after 9 on one of the longest days of the year, so it was not quite dark. Unsure which shack his was, I began to panic, until I heard, "Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call." Good old Bob. Now I was certain I was in the right place. I mounted the steps, albeit cautiously. The door swung open at the sound, and there was Alan, still in his black and whites, his shirts unbuttoned. His shirt unbuttoned, revealing his perfectly toned torso in tight white t-shirt, which was underneath. As much as I wanted to be there, I was terrified. I was only 14 3/4. Don't judge me. It was the 60s, though. 1969, actually, and things were different then. I'd recently smoked pot for the first time and had a somewhat intimate encounter for no other reason than to be more skilled for Alan. I knew with total certainty that I'd sleep with him that summer. I hadn't gone past first base until a few weeks prior, but I was determined and ready for him to hit a home run. I was. Alan and I sat on his bed while Bill and Freddie, their other good friend, who was older, sadder, funnier, and drunker, sat on Bill's. We defended civil rights, the Black Panthers, and students for a democratic society, and vehemently attacked the war on Vietnam, while we sang along to Dylan and smoked a joint. I was a young socialist, having already done my share of demonstrating. Alan and Bill were out-and-out commies. Extreme activists, they swooped me up in their passion as I was trying to seduce Alan with mine. We spent the next couple of weeks meeting nightly, engaging in like behavior. Fittingly, on July 14th, Cuban Revolution Day, I popped over to see Sue. Matter-of-factly, she told me she'd locked herself in the bathroom earlier that morning. Stuck in there for a while, Alan happened by and began working on the lock. She on one side of the door, he on the other. With the safety of the wooden plank between them, Alan, a very close to the vest, private sort of guy, said, "Do you know who I like, Sue?" "Who?" "Andy Schwartz." "What'd you say?" I interrupted, freaking out. Sue and I had never discussed my obsession with Alan, but she wasn't stupid. She smiled. "Go for it." I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to breathe. I didn't know how to walk or talk. Floating, flying, soaring. It was one of the purest feelings of bliss I have ever known. 3 years in the making. I've had my share of those, but this was the first. And cherry breakings are always historic. I don't know how I got through the day. I couldn't bear waiting one more minute for Alan to declare his love. "See you later?" he asked innocently. "You bet," I replied with a bride's wedding night blush. I spent a long time showering and picking out the perfect ripped bell-bottoms and t-shirt. Heading up to the shack slowly, laboring every step, I didn't know what, if anything, would happen that night. But I sensed the times they were changing. Just knowing he had feelings for me, that he had said them out loud, it was almost enough. Alan, unaware that I had spoken with Sue, was his usual self, singing along to Positively 4th Street and smoking a doobie when I entered. Bill and Freddie were playing gin rummy. Alan motioned for me to sit down next to him, offering me the joint. Taking a long, deep hit, I was hoping to calm the terror I was feeling. He was big man on campus. And I was an inexperienced little girl pretending to be a grown-up. But I loved him. I had loved him for so long, wanting to give myself to him. I had no idea how. As the night wore on and we got higher, we also got giddier and more playful. Alan lied down and pulled me next to him. Bill and Freddie were still playing cards. Even though we'd all been talking, smoking, and singing for hours, at that moment I was unaware of anyone or anything except Alan. Looking at him, I suppose the love was spilling out of my pores and eyeballs because